So, it's been a while since I posted a video, and it might even look like I'm neglecting this channel, which I am, though that's a tale for another day, not to mention really boring. However, there's been this video on my mind for a long time now, and I even filmed a bit of it a while back, then got busy with other stuff, lost the footage, and we all lived happily ever after. Until today. So today we, and by we I mean I, shall talk about the authors whose works I no longer wish to read. From an obligatory number 7 will surprise you. Oops, I lied. There's no number 7, but number 4 will definitely surprise you. Now, a quick disclaimer. I realize that this is a potentially contentious topic, and I generally avoid making strictly negative videos, mostly because, first of all, I don't like hurting people's feelings, and secondly because I generally don't want to argue about inconsequential nonsense. So you might be wondering why I'm filming this one at all, and rightfully so. And the thing is, I have a channel about book opinions, and if I only tell you the positive stuff, you can be 100% sure that I am being dishonest. Because nobody likes everything, and if we only say the good stuff, then our praise is worthless. At least that's my personal opinion. Feel welcome to disagree. And if this here video is not your jam, you don't need my blessing to skip it, but you have it either way. Moreover, if you happen to like or even love any of these authors here, I need you to understand that I'm not attacking you, or them for that matter. I just don't happen to like their work for one reason or another, which doesn't mean their work is unworthy of appreciation universally. Nor does it mean that I think you a bad or unintelligent person for liking them. We're all different people. The judgment on me is still up. Now, because this here is a symbolic breakup in a way, I'm gonna do it by using some of the worst cliches in the genre. It'll be fun and probably infuriating. Oh, also, the authors in this list are gonna be ordered alphabetically because any other type of order would require additional thinking on my part, and I don't feel like it. A little disclaimer, she said. All right, let's go. I have only read one book by this author, A Little Life, and there'll be no second, because this one pissed me off so supremely. Because what was the point, Hanya? This is contemporary literary fiction, which focuses on a group of friends who live in New York City and the excessive amount of suffering endured by one of them in particular. I read it several years ago on the recommendation of a booktuber, and to this day, I have no earthly idea why this thing has to be. It's trauma porn, folks. Beautifully written, mind you. The author is clearly a skilled writer, I'm not gonna lie. Yet, I consider the time I spent reading this book worse than wasted. The author keeps on piling abuse on this poor main character like he personally offended her with no respite or narrative balance in sight. He has nearly no agency or detectable personal development and is trapped repeatedly in cycles of suffering without growth or resolution. And here is one thing I wish authors would remember. While humanity is moved by suffering, it is important to use it responsibly and reasonably. A certain amount of it will keep your story alive, but if you overdo it, it will kill it by drowning. This book is a masterclass on hitting repeatedly on similar emotional beats, overindulging in melodrama, and using suffering as a plot engine rather than nuanced storytelling. It was so repetitive that it made the worst things one can think of feel kind of mundane and boring enough to make me wish for the sweet release of death. So much senseless suffering that essentially leads nowhere. It felt sensational. In addition, the setting was so limited in its development that at times I felt like I was watching a play with props rather than an honest attempt at portraying a city with people in it. It was a little life in more aspects than just one, I guess. Anyway, I didn't really see any meaningful point to the book, especially in the context of the genre that it occupies. It pissed me off so much to the point I wanted to physically fight it. As I said, I don't question the author's writing ability, just the merit of reading a contemporary literary fiction with this level of extremity and volume of abuse with no meaningful message. So it's over. The first book I read by this author was a romance novel by the very beautiful title Alone with You in the Ether. Now, we all probably know that I am no romance connoisseur, so I did not expect to be blown away, but I had been repeatedly told that this is not your run-of-the-mill regular romantic chase and tumble, that it's high art dressed in a love story, or some such. I'm heavily paraphrasing. And I picked it up hoping for something somewhat interesting. What I found instead was a self-centered, self-aggrandizing, pseudo-philosophical and other compound adjectives story about two pretentious douchebags who are both higher and deeper than any of the peasants they encounter, be they strangers, colleagues, friends, family, and thus need not be bound by the rules of common decency. Both of the main characters are just the worst. They demean absolutely everyone they come in contact with and cheat on their partners, but it's okay, you see, because it's them and it's romantic, just to name a few. Though to be fair, I think only one of them actually cheats, but one is more than enough, especially when you're trying to present it as something romantic. On top of that, not that I needed any more reasons to dislike it, mind you, but the book is full of this faux intellectual nonsense that sounds cool if you're high, but means absolutely nothing if you give it a lick of thought. So this should have been the end of it, right? Yeah, except I had already purchased Atlas 6 and the second book in the series, I forgot the name already, by the same author, and I wanted to give them a chance because they were such a big hit with everybody at the time, or nearly everybody. And to this day, I have no idea why. All the 6 odd characters we followed in book 1 were whiny, bland, and yet again, pretentious as all hell. They all had similar arrogant / intellectual personalities, which relied more on vibes rather than actual depth for their personas. And then again, we had the prose. I mean, I don't know what I was expecting. I guess a little less woo-woo because this wasn't meant as a romantic fever dream, but yet again, I was slapped with an avalanche of words that tried too hard to sound profound, but said absolutely nothing of substance. So, on November something of 2023, I made the decision to DNF the book, and more than that, to make conscious effort to waste no extra time on books that make me question the merits of learning to read. Now, is Olivie Blake the worst author? Of course not. I am sure there's a lot about her writing I am simply not wired to appreciate, or maybe not smart enough to get. So, I bid her adieu and wish her all the best. I have tried 2 books by R.F. Kuang thus far, and both times I felt like I was being lectured against my will on things on which I already agree with the author for the most part, instead of being told an actual story. Her books were really heavy-handed in their themes and message, with an overabundance of monologuing disguised as narrative, meant to seemingly show the author's academic prowess, which, while impressive undoubtedly, is more self-indulgent than actually interesting to read about, especially when it contributes nothing to the book but bulk. One additional thing I noticed was the moral absolutism oh so common with a lot of the modern authors who, despite writing stories about moral complexity, often leave no space for gray areas. Their heroes are morally righteous in a very straightforward way, and their villains are flatly villainous, which makes it all feel didactic and predetermined. And this all leads me to my next complaint. Her books are so predictable and feel uncreative despite resting on very interesting ideas. I mean, in Babel, we have an alternative Earth setting where some countries have magic and others don't, yet the major injustices of history remain the same, with the exact same perpetrators, even though those perpetrators don't have the magic. I mean, the balance of power should have been completely different, yet it remains largely unchanged, without too much of sufficient explanation. And that bothers me because it shows either laziness or you valued your message higher than your story when you need not do that. Unless you are so preoccupied with your message that you didn't even consider the logic of the world that you're creating, as long as it appears original, and it does. But that impression is only skin deep. If you scratch the surface and spend a minute and a half considering it, you'll notice there is not much behind it. It's the same with the characters. The cast generally feels more like a part of a thesis than a group of people with interior lives. On top of that, her books always over-explain their themes and never trust the reader to reach reach a conclusion on their own, or at least that's how I see it. I have seen a lot of people enjoy Rebecca Kuang's books though, and I am sure she will make a lot of readers very happy yet. It just won't be me. Listen, I know you're already angry and preparing to call me all kinds of ignorants and simpletons in the comments. I understand, but before you do that, please let me explain. I have two disclaimers for this particular entry. The first of which is, this is mostly clickbait. I know it's not honorable to do, but I knew it would attract a mob of angry people, and I thought it would be funny. Please don't judge me too harshly. I am but a mortal human with a limited amount of self-control. And the second point is that this is only a temporary break. At least that's how I mean it. I have read 5.5 books from the Wheel of Time series, and while I love the world and the general story, I don't necessarily enjoy the overly detailed way in which the author tells it. Every scene feels like it overstays its welcome. Every article of clothing is described in such detail that at times I feel like the author is trying to sell me the damn things. Every roof and supporting beam is described twice just in case. And I'm over-exaggerating here a little bit, obviously. Now, I'm generally a patient reader, and I don't mind the occasional overindulging and extra descriptions and extra sauce. I mean, I love the Lord of the Rings series, but these books here are huge, and there are a lot of them. And I think my somewhat recent attempt to read one book a month from the series has played a bad joke on me and kind of burned me out on the series. So I am taking a bit of a break from it, and one day, when my feelings warm up again, I shall return to it and to Jordan's writing. Sylvain Neuvel. I have read one trilogy by this author, The Themis Files, which is an adult sci-fi first contact with aliens told in a very interesting fashion. It's basically only conversation logs, which might sound weird, but it actually worked quite well, at least for the first two books. I read the first book, Sleeping Giants, a few years back, and I was really impressed. And while the second book was not as good in my opinion, it was still worth the read. And then book 3 came about, and it was like someone else wrote it. The story turned from a mysterious, high-speed and high-stakes battle for humanity into a languid, preachy, heavy-handed slog where the most annoying characters take the lead and monologue diabolically on subjects about which they couldn't possibly know anything of value. Then there were my favorite characters from previous books, which were now robbed of personality and turned into vessels for whatever point the author was trying to make. Not to mention that he had centered a lot of the story around some of the most annoying and boring family melodrama ever. All of this culminating in one of the most lukewarm and underwhelming series endings one could have imagined. Major plot threads fizzled out, big questions remained unanswered, and the provided emotional payout wasn't worth a damn. And yes, I understand that maybe some of you will consider me giving up on the author after just one bad book from just one series to be a little bit drastic, but I do consider the progression, or as I would qualify it, regression of the author in my decision. He changed way too much, and while I respect every author's right to focus on any subject and or theme they find important, his decisions have taken him in a direction I do not wish to follow, and so I won't. I don't know how many of you remember how big an ember in the ashes was some years back. It was basically everywhere, and it was one of the first books I read upon my returning to reading after a hiatus of several years. And whether it was because the book was so good or because I was so starved for stories, I enjoyed it immensely, despite it being a young adult romantasy, the current bane of my existence. The book is a part of a quartet, and after reading the first book, I happily purchased the other 3 books from the series. And then I read book 2, and it was basically an exercise in frustration, and not because of any particular bad writing on the part of the author. It was just because I wasn't enjoying how the story was unfolding. At the time, I was still stubbornly sticking to my no book left behind policy, so despite not enjoying book 2, I opted to read book 3, plus I already had it. And It was not better. Matter of fact, it was worse. I was frustrated with every plot line and beat, with every decision made by the characters, and with every conclusion of a scene. And still, I can't claim that there's anything objectively wrong with either her writing or her character work or her plot. I just didn't like what was happening. And realizing this, instead of ruining the sweet memories with the bitterness of my current, somewhat irrational disappointment, I opted to put an end to our story.
Is it over now? Tell me who.
And those are the authors I've broken up with during the past few years, though in all honesty, they're only the ones that I could think of right away, and I'm sure there'll be many more to come, for as we mature and grow, hopefully, we also become a little more critical and, let's be honest, a little harder to please. I hope this video didn't cause you too many negative emotions. It was meant mostly as a joke, though I do stand by every word I said. And if you happen to love and cherish any of these authors, please continue to do so unencumbered with any worry about my irrelevant opinion. If you like them, there's a reason, and you owe me no allegiance in this aspect. I love you regardless. Do you have any authors you've called it quits with, and would you like to share it? If you do, or have anything else to say, the comment section is all yours. And now we've reached goodbye. We have this song in Bulgaria that I think is very appropriate for this video, and it goes something like, "But there shall come the best day when you will be so far away from me." That day has come for me and these authors, and I encourage you all to cherish your limited time on this earth and break it off with the books that aren't a good match. Or anything else, really. Farewell.
Can we say goodbye with grace, or do we keep chasing ghosts? Try to fill an empty space.